Sousa family includes two college-educated young women who say scientific instruments prove they are under attack.
The trajectories we've tracked, it's been coming from the neighbors. First, you're skeptical, but we've tracked our health, the temperature in the home. We've had blank that are supposed to reflect microradiation and radar. They're radar reflective material, and they burn against radiation because microwave radiation.
Organized stalking. Two of them are from Pennsylvania, but were in the area for their support group, which helps them get through their daily struggles of people constantly putting them down.
We feel as though there is a great abuse going on, not only in our country, but across the world. This is a global problem.
John and Terry are friends from Pennsylvania who have been living in fear for years.
I was inundated with harassment, just absolutely inundated with it. I would be told what I did that day, what I did the day before, where I went, what I had to eat, what I was wearing currently, where I was sitting in my apartment.
Some of us that are single people that live alone are harassed in the community, the hacking of our electronic devices, computers, phones.
These are just two of the many people in the world who are victims of stalkers and bullying.
It's totally immature.
This story on our website, kcba.com. New tonight, police call it bullying on steroids. We're talking about gang stalking, but it actually has nothing to do with the gangs that you first think of. Central Coast News reporter Candace Wynn learned more about the trend and how it's getting more dangerous because of the internet.
It makes me feel afraid.
Lawrence Gazzino claims his neighbors are gang stalking him because he plays loud music late at night and is outspoken. He said for the last year and a half, he's been systematically followed by a group of people. At one point, he said they climbed on his roof to harass him. Gazzino said gang stalking and bullying devastated his relationships with friends and, worst of all, family.
That's the worst part of it. If it was me, I would take action.
Santa Cruz Police Lieutenant Larry Richards said police are becoming more aware of gang stalking because of cyberbullying. But what is gang stalking?
Basically, the victims could be driving their car or talking on their phones or walking the streets when a group of people try to systematically terrorize them.
Richards said gang stalking is nothing new, but new technology is making it more common.
Gang stalking itself they have elevated themselves to technology. So this is something that's been going on before the age of Facebook, Twitter, those other social websites. They just now have gone into those areas.
Gazzino said he's proof that the problem isn't just online and that it can hit too close to home.
It's the thing nightmares are made of.
You know, it's so creepy that I decided to have a bolt put on the door, and I'm having my son sleep in here with me.
Creepy only begins to describe it.
It's like an alternate reality, really.
When she'd get home from work, Fasika Tafara started noticing things out of place in her home.
You know, they were just all open, but what was weird is, so for example, they were open like this, but they were all at the same level.
First, the windows, then lights turned on. Her cabinets pulled out.
It's intended to let me know that somebody has been here, essentially, right? So all of the drawers have been pulled out. And
something strange every single day for almost the past month. She finally realized someone has been coming inside.
Are people following me? And then I started to wonder also, well, how do they know when I'm here and when I'm not here?
Then Tafara found this small camera in her 11-year-old son's bedroom. So she took to the internet and started digging. What she found? Something called community or gang stalking. It's an eerie practice aimed at your psyche to make you almost feel like you're going crazy.
It's spooky, and my understanding is that if this is in fact what it is, it can go on for years, you know.
Only you're not. Tafara left her phone recording audio at her house. Listen, you can hear what sounds like people rummaging around. On one, you can hear what sounds like drilling.
So this hole here has been cut into the attic space.
Tafara says detectives have been to the house.
It's kind of like, you know, if it happens again, call us, but there's not much we can do.
Something that makes this even more terrifying.
Into the heads of Americans.
Dr. Robert Duncan. First question for you. What's negative about what you've done?
I've empowered the dark side by some of my work.
And what do you mean by that?
Technology is neutral.
Right.
It can be used for good or evil. I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, and Department of Defense.
Is this the stuff, voices in the head and things like that?
Yes.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their heads, they sleep inside tinfoil boxes, they do a lot of crazy things, it seems. But when they talk to us, they seem totally normal. They seem totally sane. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them.
He's not even bothering to hide it.
They're called voice of God weapons.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely. You have to remember, the CIA has a long history of experimenting on our citizens, from LSD to...
Sure. Okay, we're talking here like going back to MK Ultra and all that in the 60s and 70s. But we were told all that stopped. Is that untrue?
Untrue. These programs continue under new names, new budgets. It's the ultimate weapon.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abused, that's a light word. They're being tortured.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all. Okay, doctor, to deliver this, how do they get into your head? I've heard of these Gwen towers. They allegedly were used before, and now they claim that they're not used for anything.
They do match up with the properties and necessary capabilities. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain. That's
Okay, so today I'd like to speak with people who are in the public who are not familiar with gang stalking, or individuals who are going through gang stalking. The first thing that occurs out of gang stalking is known as the confusion stage. Pretty much an individual does not know how to interpret the events that are going on. It used to take years for somebody to get past the confusion stage. This is before the era of the internet, YouTube, blogs that came out, going back to the 80s. I spoke to a woman who was living in Detroit, and she worked at a cafeteria. And she would set out plates, forks, knives for the people at the cafeteria. She would leave, go on break. When she came back to her job, she would notice that all these plates and forks, knives, everything she set out would end up right back where they were before she placed them out. She's the only individual I spoke to that's been going through gang stalking, going back to the early 80s. But this started occurring in her life more and more rapidly, and she started noticing people following her, using the color coding, using the mimicking, and she had no way of learning what was happening. It took several years for her to figure out what gang stalking was. In the 1990s, more information started coming online about gang stalking, just blogs, all sorts of information, books started emerging, and then with the YouTube era, people are just pouring in with their stories from all over the world who are going through these similar things. People in China, people in Russia, people in third world countries. I've spoken to people in Africa where there really isn't much of a government or much of a corporate base, but yet these people are living in the jungles and they're still experiencing gang stalking. Somehow it's finding their way to them. The confusion stage, going back to that, is meant for the individual to basically have some sort of nervous breakdown or psychological breakdown. Oftentimes it ends up in violence. Individuals just trip out. They may even end up harming somebody, killing somebody. It could end up in suicide. It could end up in drug use, other sorts of nefarious behavior as a coping mechanism to deal with what's going on. The confusion stage now takes about 3 weeks for the average individual to figure out what gang stalking is. They're going to start talking about people following them with colors, the brightening tactics, where they're followed with bright lights constantly, all the time. They're going to the internet, Googling this stuff, figuring out what it is. Same thing with the people who are doing these assignments. oftentimes they might not even know what gang stalking is. After a period of time, they will go online and start looking up the things that they're asked to do, and they will discover that they're gang stalking individuals. I had a woman email me who discovered she was gang stalking people. She was approached at a shopping mall with $100 and asked to change her hair color red, follow people with the brights on, do all this activity. After that period, she would then be contacted through a smoking advertisement. That was her cue to know that her assignment was coming in. Then they would tell her what to do, what to wear, what to go out to the world, and how to follow people, yada yada, who her targets were. Once she discovered what gang stalking was, then she became scared to talk about it. She would only contact me through email. She was afraid to speak over the phone because she felt as though she would be targeted with gang stalking as a result of speaking about it. She told me through email, she said, I know I'm being watched and I'm afraid to speak about it. So this is an interesting phenomenon. Through the confusion stage, the average individual who's going through gang stalking will be afraid to speak about it with other individuals. They may be afraid to talk to their family members about it. They may be afraid to go out and, show people evidence, film clips. They're not sure what's going to happen. They're not sure what's going to happen to them. Now again, once they feel comfortable enough and they see this happening to many people, then they become more vocal about it. And a lot of them will come online and discuss their experiences, talk about the things that have been happening to them. When that confusion stage comes to an end, then comes what's known as the distraction stage. I'll get into that later on, but basically the distraction stage is set in place to use intimate things in your life, intimate people, intimate like objects, certain vehicles, things like that will be used to distract you more fully. Covert drugging. You can have your food drugged on several occasions while you're out eating. Your neighbors may use electronic weapons on you. That's happened to a lot of people. Again, these are things that are happening all over the world. These aren't isolated incidences. These are people who are experiencing the same exact tactics. If everybody came online who was going through gang stalking, it would be in the millions. Right now, there are just thousands of stories, probably a few 100,000 stories out online about it. But if everybody who was going through it came out, it would be overwhelming. So, in today's world, the news media is picking up on this stuff, and they're starting to present it. You're starting to see live stories of public officials saying that gang stalking is a problem. Then with the voice tech, the voice to skull activity, there's even people coming out and admitting that that's real now. Okay, so going back to what I'm saying about the confusion stage, that's the time in which an individual discovers that, that after the confusion stage, they discover how it's being networked. Individuals are approached and asked to do these assignments through Facebook, other apps. They're approached in person. They may represent various different groups, and they'll get the individuals to do these assignments around the person. But within the confusion stage, the individual is a phenomenon. How are all these different people wearing black and red and following me? How are all these different people following me with the brights on? How are all these different people doing all these strange things? How do they know where I'm at all the time? How are they coming out of the woodwork doing this? All these different people are isolated. It's really isolated. Different groups of people are approached in different ways and financed in different ways to carry this stuff out. There's an overall view of it. But none of these individuals really know each other. They're not operating collectively in groups as it's happening. But there's an overall hierarchy that's not working in. So part of the confusion stage is that individuals get to seem very paranoid and perhaps even delusional to think, oh my God, everybody's following me. Everybody's doing this. And so when they approach their family members and they approach their boss at work or they approach their colleagues, if they approach the average person on the street, it's going to look like a very delusional story. But in fact, it's actually happening every single day. Okay, so after the confusion stage, you enter the distraction stage. The confusion stage, it once kept individuals there for long periods of time, and it's no longer doing that. As I said, after 3 weeks, average person's finding out they're being gang stalked. So when they enter the distraction stage, the harassment campaigns that are targeting the individual, they begin to zoom in on what can emotionally disturb an individual the most. Now, a lot of people are being fooled into thinking that their mind is being read, or that this is some sort of overall demonic event or whatever. There's a whole system there coming out of, like a private sector that monitors everybody, everywhere, every second of the day. So, for instance, if I'm around a cell phone, and I don't even have to be on the phone talking, I can just have the cell phone sitting on a table. What I'm saying across the phone is going to be picked up audibly. And the details of what I'm saying, I may be talking about certain people, certain events, certain things, that will begin to be mimicked back to me through the events of gang stalking. Okay? So now I'm seeing, now the things I'm talking about, the things I'm discussing, the things that have the most relevance and importance, these things are going to be used to bring in a form of distraction. And let's not forget, you're already going through constant gang stalking, and things like electronic weapons may be being used against you. Things like covert drugging, you may be having your food drugged. Those types of things are already going on. And then the things that you're emotionally most attached to, it could be a family member, it could be like, for a woman, it could be her husband, for a man, it could be his wife. They will use individuals around you who you put the most importance on. So if you put importance on a certain individual, that individual will be asked to do the most assignments. And this is designed to disturb somebody psychologically and cause a lot of confusion and chaos in the person's life. That's all it's there for. And this comes in when the person is leaving the confusion stage and they're watching you and analyzing you and doing what I like to call, psychological profiling. They're trying to see, how well does he know this person? How well does he know that person? So now these individuals will begin following you constantly. And oftentimes, they don't know where you are, but they will be told through the technology, through an app, like Google Maps. There'll be certain maps pre-designed that they will be alerted to their phone. Go here and drive by this corner. Now, when that person gets that sent to their phone and they know to drive by that corner, I'm going to be there. So it's networked, and the technology is doing 90% of the work. And the technology is networking the organized stalking. So I'm hanging out, having a good time, and now I'm being stalked by an individual on the corner. They're being shown specifically where to go to do that assignment. I say, my God, this person, that's the 5th time today this person's been following me. This is a really awkward situation. And then you move on to another area. It starts happening again and again and again. Now, at the same time that individual's stalking you, you're still going through organized stalking by multiple individuals. You're still maybe getting your food drugged. You still may be having electronic weapons projected upon you. This is a series of events that happens 24/7. So for an individual to maintain their cool and to maintain their calm, it's very challenging. It's not nearly as simple as it looks. To an outside observer, it's going to look like the individual may be paranoid. It's going to look like the individual may be somewhat delusional. This is set up purposely to avoid detection of the individual stalking the target. That's what it's there for. It's there to elude away from the organized stalking. So individuals are coming online and saying, oh my God, it's terrible. There's certain people that are following me. My food's being drugged. I'm going through electronic harassment, all this stuff. And they're counting on the overall system. This is around the world. The overall system depends upon the individual to look like there's something wrong with them. And so that's what people in the public are seeing more of. If you're a family member of somebody going through this, pay close attention to what the person's telling you. They're not misleading you at all. They're not. Now, the distraction phase is something that's very unique within itself, because it takes the individual into a self-process to where they have to discover what these things mean to them. And so somebody who's going through gang stalking it is like 50 times processing more information than the average person walking the streets. And they're being stalked by an individual. If their behavior begins to become strange, that is completely normal and it should be expected, because you're talking about somebody being repeatedly stalked by groups of people 24/7 throughout the day. So the way they perceive their reality is going to be very different from the average stalking case in America. When most people think of stalking, they think of, some guy following his girlfriend around or something like that after a bad breakup. Coincidentally, the average person in America being stalked statistically is being stalked by 3 or more people. Think about that. Okay, now going back to what I was saying. The average individual being group stalked is constantly seeing this. And there's patterns, the color coding, the red and the black. So I may leave my home and be repeatedly stalked by a series of events by the same people. Then I go over into another area, and there's a system called pass it along. Pass it along. So I go to another area, then there's a whole nother group of individuals who have now been assigned to do the group stalking activity. These two groups might not know each other, but the overall campaign has arranged this. And so when you're looking at a family member or a loved one or somebody you know saying they're being stalked by multiple people, they're not lying to you. It's the same program, the same protocol, and it's meant to seem as if the person's delusional, because how are all these people doing the same stuff and they know how to do it? Good point. The people doing the group stalking, a lot of them aren't really sure how this is affecting the person that they're stalking. They will be asked to do an assignment. Say Jim is asked to wear a blue coat and follow Rick. It may be explained to Jim in a certain way as to why he has to do this. The blue coat may be symbolic of what you call mimicking, right? Rick may have been getting followed by people with blue coat stalking him for the last 6 months, getting his food drugged, getting electronic weapons, having all sorts of stuff. This new guy, Jim, he doesn't know anything. He might not know anything about that. He just knows he's been given an assignment for whatever purpose, and as he's carrying out the assignment, the detail of the assignment was to wear the blue coat. Now this new guy just added on extra stalking to a man who's been getting stalked repeatedly every single day for 6 months. That's exactly how this stuff works, and that's how it's happening. It's very unusual to be able to sit down with somebody who is a gang stalker and get the information from them, because the way they perceive it is completely different. I've had people verify with me what their assignment details were to me and how they were being asked to do it. And the way they explained it to me, I could see why they would be doing it. Somebody was told I was doing some sort of check fraud or something like that, and they had to wear red shirts with the brights on their car and follow me back and forth to the store all day. This person didn't even know what gang stalking was. They were high on drugs when they were doing it. I know them. They've been drugged. The person was a drug user their whole life. They were drunk half the time, didn't even have a driver's license. But they were chosen to do these gang stalking assignments. And they didn't even know what gang stalking was. So that's a little bit on the distraction phase. And the distraction phase usually is something somebody is going to become familiar with over a period of maybe a year. After a year, they're really going to get the feeling of how this stuff is meant to work on an emotional level, at a disturbing level. As I said before, with the private sector, there's cameras everywhere. So you're constantly being mimicked back to yourself. and the individuals following you, they're not the ones orchestrating it. The average person asked to do gang stalking, they're not going to know very much more than what the details of the assignment are. If they're more intimate and they're causing more havoc, they're being used for that purpose, but they're never really going to have an overall detail on how this stuff works. From my perception, the people who do the most gang stalking, they're owned the most by the system that orchestrates it. The more an individual gang stalks somebody and the more they're intimate involved in it, the more they're owned. Because now these individuals know how they're stalking an individual, and they never wanted to admit to it. Now they know how it's being done. They've seen things. So now they have to be owned because it's a liability. We can't have these people telling the public how this stuff is happening. So the more somebody is gang stalking you on an intimate level and the more nefarious it is, the more you want to avoid those types of people. If you see somebody doing minor assignments against an individual, you know, I've hung out with people who've done assignments at me, and they've explained a lot of detail to me on how it's done. But if you know individuals are responsible for using electronic weapons against you, doing a lot of nefarious activity, those are the people you least want to be around. Those are the people who are can't even come up with the right word for it. But those are the least individuals that you want to be around. So once you get that in your mind and you go out into the public and you're going through gang stalking, and this comes back into the people who are going through gang stalking around their family members. If you're a family member of an individual who's going through gang stalking, or if you're a friend of the person who's going through gang stalking, be very careful of the people you allow into your life. You got to be careful of not just what you know. You got to be careful of who you know. Who you know can get you in a lot of trouble. You know, it's not always what you know; it's who you know. Be careful around the people you have in your presence. Be careful of the people you allow into your life.